Look at the image on your screen right now. Just stare at it while I talk. Because for the last 70 years, if you even whispered about this stuff, you were called crazy. You were the weirdo in the basement with a tinfoil hat connecting red strings on a corkboard. They called us delusional. They called us schizo. But what happens when the exact same things we've been screaming about since the 1940s are suddenly being read into the congressional record under oath? You weren't crazy. You've just been paying attention while everyone else was asleep. We're in the middle of a soft disclosure event, a slow drip normalization campaign designed to prevent global ontological shock, and the internet is still treating it like a meme. Wake up. The paradigm is actively shifting right under our feet. Let's talk about the hearings, because that's where the timeline split. We had high-ranking intelligence officials, people with the highest security clearances on the planet, sitting in front of the United States Congress, raising their right hands and stating unequivocally that we are not alone. And the craziest part? The general public just scrolled past it. We had David Grusch, a former intelligence officer who literally co-led the UAP task force, testifying under oath that the government is in possession of intact and partially intact non-human crafts. And not just the metal. He explicitly stated that biological evidence was recovered, non-human biologics. The media barely blinked, but the implications are staggering. We are talking about a multi-decade illegally funded crash retrieval and reverse engineering program that is operated completely outside of congressional oversight. How do you even hide something that massive for over 80 years? You don't keep it in the Pentagon. If it's in the Department of Defense, it's subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So what do? They launder the technology. They offshore the crashed craft to private aerospace defense contractors. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon. Once the hardware crosses the threshold into the private sector, it becomes proprietary corporate intellectual property. It vanishes behind a wall of corporate secrecy that Congress can't easily touch. That's the real reason behind the Schumer UAP Disclosure Act, trying to assert eminent domain over non-human intelligence technologies. The politicians finally realized that private corporations are holding on to the greatest technological leap in human history, and they are using our tax dollars to hide it from us. But let's look at the actual flight characteristics of these things, because this is where modern physics completely breaks down. Look at the 2004 Nimitz encounter. Commander David Fravor, a Top Gun naval aviator, engages a smooth, white, wingless cylinder, the famous Tic Tac. It had no exhaust, no visible flight control surfaces, and no thermal signature. It was dropping from 80,000 feet to sea level in a matter of seconds. Do you understand the G-forces involved in that? Any human pilot would be turned into absolute soup. The craft itself should have been ripped apart by the atmospheric friction. But it wasn't. It didn't even create a sonic boom. It's as if it was manipulating the space-time fabric around it, essentially falling into a localized gravity well of its own making. And this brings us to the most unhinged, beautiful, terrifying part of the rabbit hole. The interdimensional hypothesis. Because if these things are bending space-time, who says they are flying here from Zeta Reticuli or Alpha Centauri in a straight line? What if they aren't coming from outer space at all? What if they are coming from right here, just slightly out of phase with our reality? Think about a two-dimensional shadow on a wall. If a three-dimensional apple moves through that two-dimensional space, the shadow beings wouldn't see an apple. They would see a flat circle suddenly appear, change shape, and then vanish. That is exactly how UAPs behave in our airspace. They appear instantly, change direction without inertia, and disappear. We are the shadows, and they are the apples dropping through our dimension. This connects directly to the consciousness aspect, the woo factor that everyone in the government is terrified to talk about. The people deeply embedded in the phenomenon, like Jacques Vallée or the folks at the Skinwalker Ranch investigations, they all reach the same conclusion. The phenomenon is trickster-like. It interacts with the observer. It knows when it's being looked at. This isn't just nuts and bolts. It's a consciousness-driven technology. That's why you have remote viewers from the CIA's Stargate project reporting the exact same entities and structures as people having close encounters of the third kind. The craft might not even be vehicles in the way we understand cars or planes. They might be physical manifestations of a higher intelligence pressing its thumb into the clay of our reality.
And what about those non-human biologics David Grusch mentioned? Are we talking about little green men? Gray aliens? The current working theory circulating in the darkest corners of the intelligence community is even weirder. They might be biological drones. Manufactured avatars grown in a lab specifically to operate the craft because an actual organic consciousness from another dimension couldn't survive the frequency shift into our reality. They are biological AI, 3D printed organic husks that act as a tether for an intelligence that exists entirely outside of our physical universe. We are picking up their crash drones, their disposable probes, and we are trying to reverse engineer iPhone 15s using Stone Age tools!
And if you want to know where they are hiding, stop looking up. Stop looking at the stars. Look down. Over 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by oceans, completely unmapped and unmonitored. Military whistleblowers have been reporting unidentified submerged objects, USOs, for decades. Transmedium craft that drop from low Earth orbit directly into the water without making a splash, traveling at hundreds of knots underwater without creating cavitation or a wake. There is a very real, very terrifying possibility that there is an advanced manufacturing facility or a completely separate ancient breakaway civilization residing permanently in the abyssal zones of our own oceans. They aren't visiting us. They share the house. We just live in the attic.
There is one final theory that keeps me awake at night. The anthropic theory. The time traveler hypothesis. What if the reason they look humanoid with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head is because they are us? What if they are human beings from 50,000 years in the future, coming back to observe their own evolutionary choke point? They aren't abducting us to experiment on aliens. They are collecting pure genetic material from their own ancestors before the environmental and nuclear degradation of their timeline. They are anthropologists from the future, watching us carefully to ensure we don't blow ourselves up before we reach the technological singularity that creates them. That would explain why they are always seen around our nuclear facilities, shutting down our ICBMs. They are managing our timeline.
Letting out a deep breath. I know this sounds crazy. I know the algorithm is probably going to suppress this video. They want to keep you distracted with celebrity drama and political theater so you don't look up and realize the cage you've been living in has no roof. But the absolute truth is finally bleeding out through the cracks of the military-industrial complex. The disclosure is happening right now in slow motion every single day. Don't let them gaslight you. Do your own research. Read the declassified reports. Watch the congressional hearings and connect the dots yourself. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to keep diving down this rabbit hole with me. And whatever you do, do not go back to sleep. They are already here.